It's clear that it is love and kindness, in the sight of blindness that it is God's love and the failing brightness that's given us hope and no escape from the crisis. Apocalypse.
Chapter 17, Embers of Vengeance. The scorch line stretched before them, a hellscape of black glass and smoldering craters. The seventh Zion stood at the edge of the volcanic plains. Thalia, adjusting her bag of tricks, now glowing faintly from the divine light, said, "This place, it's like the world's wound." Kale, resting his hand on Oathkeeper, said, "Wounds can heal. Or fester. Let's make sure it's the former." Lumina, scanning the horizon, said, "There's movement. Villages, but they're empty. No sight of creatures or any life." They entered into the nearby cave entrance and immediately were surprised to find people gathered together in hiding. Someone quietly spoke and asked, "Who goes there?" Darian replied, "Be not afraid, be strong and of good courage." The people heard the words and their defenses were dropped. Villagers gathered around Darian and began to communicate with the travelers, as dawn broke over the crater. The women wept with relief, the men stared in awe, and children tentatively approached the haloed figure who had saved them. You're real," whispered an elderly woman, her face etched with lines of suffering. "The saint of light that the old tales spoke of." Darian shifted uncomfortably, the golden light around him dimming slightly. "I'm just a man who can touch shadows until they go poof," he said, trying to make light of the situation. "No need for titles." But the village elder approached, knelt, and pressed something into Darian's palm, a small, crude carving of a man with a halo. "Our children have been disappearing for months," he said, voice breaking. "We thought they were taken for food or labor. But last week, we found remains, twisted, half-shadow, still whimpering." His eyes met Darian's. "You've given us back our future. Whatever you are, thank you." Darian's smile faded. He pocketed the carving and stood. "I need to move on. These stalkers came from somewhere, and I'm guessing there's worse where they came from." As he turned to leave, a young boy tugged at his cloak. "Will you come back?" Looking down at the child's hopeful face, Darian's expression softened. "Count on it." Serafina unfurled a map. The scriptures warned of this. The Emberclaw Dominion. Isn't this where a Daemon warlord began carving his own kingdom from ash? Darian, the cross flickering, said, "Then we carve it back." 3 days' journey brought Darian and the seventh Zion to the edge of the scorch line, a 1,000-mile belt of blackened earth where ash fell like snow. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground itself felt alive, pulsing with barely contained fire. "Lovely neighborhood," he muttered, shielding his eyes from the haze. Subtle decor choices. In the distance, he could make out the first village of the Ember Hollow region, clusters of huts built on stilts to avoid the occasional lava flows that oozed from the even more volcanic plains. As he approached with the group, he noticed something odd. The village was silent. No smoke from cooking fires. No children playing. Just the whisper of hot wind through empty doorways. "Hello," he called, entering the village square. A whimper came from a partially collapsed hut. Inside, he found Zara, a young woman clutching a small bundle. Her skin was blistered from heat, her eyes hollow. "Water," she croaked. "Please, water." Darian gave her his canteen, helping her sit up. "What happened here? Where is everyone?" Zara's eyes widened at the sight of his halo. "The saint," she whispered. "You've come to save us." "Save you from what, exactly?" The village they entered was Ashvale. Charred huts stood like skeletons. A lone figure, the girl Zara, was still huddled in the shadows. Zara, her voice hoarse, said, "You're too late, it's just not right." "The Emberclaw tyrant came yesterday," she said, shuddering. "Molochai's. He demanded our monthly tribute of workers for the mines. When we couldn't provide enough, She pulled back the cloth covering her bundle, revealing a burnt doll. "They took my daughter. Others too. Anyone strong enough to swing a pick?" Darian felt his halo pulse brighter. "Where are these mines?" "Beyond the obsidian spires," Zara pointed east. "But stranger, you all look tough, but you shouldn't go. The Eshfenian camp is heavily guarded. They have magma claws that tear through stone, and the Ember Claw tyrant himself, he's 8 feet tall with magma for blood. When the Molochais came, nobody could resist." Charity, kneeling, offered another glass of water. "Molochais, no it can't be, wasn't he a relative of that overlord Kraghor?" Zara, shuddering, said, "Kraghor was a bully. Molochais is a plague. He calls himself the Soul Flame, says he'll burn the world clean." Illyra pressed her palm to the poisoned soil. "The land's dying. Not just scorched, corroded." Amara, healing Zara's hands, said, "We need to find these mines. Free the captives." Hannah's scrolls flickered with urgency. "The tomes and scriptures mark a fortress here, Inferno Citadel, built around a core of endless flame." Myra, loading her celestial flintlocks attached to her stringed bow, said, "Then we storm it together." Darian stood, adjusting his Elijah's mantle and regathering his resonant piece. "Good thing we ain't normal." The journey to the Inferno Citadel revealed the horror of Moloch's reign. They passed Ashwalker camps where people were forced to mine Molochite, a black metal that burned skin. Hellhound patrols of Inferno pups stalked the wastes, and Emberclaw drakes circled overhead. As they traveled deeper into the scorch line, they began to see signs of the Eshfenian operation. Labor camps. In dread to speak of, they were pits where villagers hacked at volcanic rock with primitive tools, overseen by magma claws that whipped those who slowed. Processing facilities. Crude smelters, where Inferno pups stoked fires with their magma fur, melting ore into weapons-grade metal. Guard towers, perched on volcanic vents, Emberclaw sentinels scanned for escapees, their Inferno aura melting anyone who approached unannounced. The Eshfenian enterprise was simple but devastatingly effective. It was forced labor, villages were required to provide workers or face tax collection raids. Resource theft, the mines produced Molochite, a metal that corroded other metals, perfect for daemon weapons. Weapon sales, the processed Molochite was sold to other daemon camps at exorbitant rates. And last, the final agenda, population control. Disobedient villages had their children taken to be raised as future labor or soldiers. With horror also, they needed a never-ending meat supply for their monsters to feed. "It's basically slavery with extra steps," Darian muttered, watching a group of exhausted villagers carry baskets of ore past a checkpoint guarded by a Molochite halberd-wielding sentinel. At the center of this operation stood the Inferno core, a mile-wide lake of magma that powered the entire region. And on its shores, the Inferno Citadel, a fortress built from cooled lava and bone. Arik, his axe frostbite gleaming, said, "These hounds, they're not just beasts. They're scouts. Tracking us." Thalia strummed a low chord on her instrument. "I can mask our sound, but not our light." Darian's glows like a beacon. Darian, grim, said, "Then we don't hide. We distract." The assault on Inferno Citadel began at midnight. The fortress loomed like a jagged crown of obsidian and bone. Thalia and Hannah created a diversion, projecting illusions of a daemon army. Darian's presence didn't go unnoticed. As he helped a group of escaped villagers hide in an abandoned mine shaft, a rumbling shook the ground. "He's coming," whispered a miner, face pale with terror. "The Molochites felt your light." "Who's coming? What's coming?" Darian asked, golden glow intensifying. "The Emberclaw tyrant himself. When he comes, everyone burns." The ground trembled again, more violently. Outside the mine entrance, the air warped with heat. Darian helped the villagers deeper into the mine. "Stay here. I'll handle this. He emerged to find the sky darkened by smoke. At the village edge stood a massive figure, 22 feet tall with magma fur that glowed like molten metal. His Molochite halberd dripped with the remains of a guard who had failed to stop Darian's approach. So, Molochite's voice rumbled like distant thunder, the Lightbringer arrives. I've heard tales from my Anunnaki cousins. A little man who thinks he can challenge the Daemon army. Darian squared his shoulders, the golden scythe materializing in his hand. Not challenging. Ending. Molochites laughed, the sound causing small avalanches on the distant slopes. You. And us? I am Molochites, devourer of hope, master of the scorch line. I have burned 1,000 villages to ash. My armies mine the bones of the earth itself. He slammed his halberd into the ground, sending a wave of superheated air toward Darian. Plants withered and died in seconds. Impressive resume, Darian replied, the heat parting around his halo. Too bad it's all downhill from here. Kale and Myra infiltrated the armory, cutting through Molochite locks and silencing guards. Charity and Arik stormed the gates, shattering barriers and freezing hinges. Illyra and Amara healed rescued slaves and sabotaged the core of Endless Flame. Lumina and Seraphina fought their way to the throne room. Darian, leading the frontal assault, his scythe blazing, said, Molochites, face your reckoning. The throne room was a nightmare of heat and shadow. Molochites the soul flame stood, a vortex of magma and ash. Molochites, his voice a volcanic roar, said, the saint, and his pathetic light. You think you can extinguish a flame that burns souls? The battle was chaos. Molochites summoned flame-bound golems. Kale and Lumina dueled his lieutenants. Thalia played a counter-melody, destabilizing the room. Then Molosus attacked first, swinging his massive halberd in a horizontal arc that superheated the air. Darian dodged, but the residual heat still singed his leg hairs. First hit's free, Molosus taunted. Next one will melt your bones. Darian rolled behind a boulder, mind racing. In this moment his glow was dim and he didn't understand why he couldn't fight like usual. He had an idea. Water weakness. Ice. I'm going to need to find a way to cool him down. The tear of the veiled pendant at Shakina's chest pulsed warmly. Of course, she said, the saint needs water. She activated the pendant's power, creating a golden aura that temporarily nullified Molosus' heat wave. The massive daemon roared in frustration. Cheap tricks won't save you, Molosus charged, each footstep leaving molten footprints. Shakina moved far from the way before things got too hectic. Darian sprinted toward a nearby river, a thin stream of water that cut through the volcanic rock. He touched the water's surface, and the echoing dagger glowed in response. Water and shadow. Opposites. Need to combine them. Molosus reached the riverbank, raising his halberd for a killing blow. Darian plunged the echoing dagger into the water, channeling his power through it. The water froze instantly, creating an ice bridge across the river. Darian ran across it, Molochite's strike hitting the ice instead, creating a steam explosion that momentarily blinded the giant. Phase 1 complete, Darian muttered. Now for Phase 2. He sprinted toward the mine where he'd hidden the villagers, calling out, I need water. Anything you can carry. The villagers emerged, clutching clay pots, animal skins, anything that could hold water. Darian directed them to pour it on the ground near Craghor. What foolishness is this? Craghor laughed, stomping toward them. Water? Against me? Darian touched the ground where water pooled, whispering to his blank tome. The tome glowed, and suddenly he could feel the moisture in the air, in the ground, in Molosus' own magma blood. Water and fire, he said, eyes glowing. Opposites that can be balanced. He raised the golden scythe, now pulsing with blue-white energy. Or in this case, used against each other. With a swift motion, he sliced the air. The moisture around Kraghor flash froze, creating an ice shell around the massive daemon. The heat from Kraghor's body fought against the ice, creating a violent steam reaction. Impossible! Kraghor bellowed, his movements slowing as the ice thickened. Darien pressed his advantage, darting in close. His mantle allowed him to phase partially through Molas's defenses, and the golden scythe glowed brighter with each strike. "Your mind's closed," Darien said between strikes. "Your slaves are free. And you're about to become a very large paperweight." Molokai slammed his Molokite scepter into the ground. "You cling to hope? Let me show you true despair." He grabbed a chain, yanking a captive child toward the core. Darien, his eyes blazing, said, "Enough." Drawing on the divine energy from the obsidian crucible, Darien channeled his power through his radiant halberd. The blade split into a spear of light, piercing Molokai's chest. Molokai's, screaming, said, "Impossible. I am eternal." Darien, his voice steady, said, "Eternity's a long time to be wrong." With a final, powerful swing, Darien drove the scythe into Molas's chest. The ice shell shattered, and the massive daemon roared in agony. A shock wave of golden light erupted from the wound, spreading outward. Molas's body began to cool, magma blood solidifying into obsidian. His roar faded to a whisper, then silence. The core of endless flame destabilized, and Molokai's form began to unravel. Molokai's, snarling as he disintegrated, said, "The veil will consume you. All of you." The core exploded in a silent flash of white light. The citadel was left a hollow shell, and the land around it was already greening with new growth. "Too bright," were his final words as his form crumbled, leaving only a Molokite halberd and an inferno crown with a ruby gemstone as reward. The freed captives, hundreds of villagers, gathered in the citadel's ruins. Darien stood before them. Zara, running down from the mountains teary-eyed, said, "You gave us back our future." Darien said, "I gave you back yours. Now protect it." They stared in disbelief at their fallen oppressor. "Is he dead?" asked Zara, clutching her daughter's doll. "Very," Darien confirmed, retrieving his rewards. "And his mine is closed for business." The news spread quickly. By nightfall, villagers from all over the scorch line had gathered at the Inferno core, watching as Darien approached the edge of the mile-wide lava lake. "This ends now," he announced, the halo around his head blazing like a second sun. He raised the golden scythe high, channeling all his power into it. The blade glowed white-hot, then blue, then a brilliant gold that outshone the lava itself. With a cry, he plunged the scythe into the ground. Golden light spread through the earth, racing toward the volcano. Deep below, something shifted. The magma lake began to cool, harden, transform. The Inferno core solidified into obsidian glass, the heat diminishing to a comfortable warmth. The toxic fumes cleared. The air, once heavy with ash, felt clean. "It's cooling," whispered a miner, touching the ground in wonder. "The whole region is stabilizing." Darien nodded, looking out over the transformed landscape. "Not just cooling. Healing." Where the harsh volcanic plains had been, tiny green shoots were already emerging through the ash. The oppressive heat had moderated to a gentle warmth. "Plants will grow again," he said. "The land is giving you a second chance." The villagers wept with joy, some falling to their knees. Children who had hidden during the battle now emerged, staring wide-eyed at the golden figure who had saved them. That night, back at the village of Ember Hollow, they held a feast. Tables were set up in the newly cooled square, laden with whatever food could be gathered. Darien sat among them, no longer glowing quite so brightly, just a man with golden eyes and a tired smile. "Why us?" asked Zara, sitting beside him. "There are so many villages suffering under the Daemon army. Why start with us?" Darian looked at the carving the elder had given him, now hanging from a cord around his neck. I was just passing through, looking for somewhere to sleep that wasn't crawling with shadow beasts. He smiled at the children playing nearby, no longer afraid of eruptions or raids. Guess I found more than I was looking for. As the celebrations continued, Darian slipped away to the edge of the village. The night was clear, stars visible through the thinning ash clouds. For the first time since arriving, he could see the floating spire in the distance Eclipse Citadel, looming like a jagged tooth against the night sky. A figure approached Zara, carrying a blanket. The nights are still cold, even with the land healing. Darian accepted the blanket with a nod. Thank you. Will you stay? She asked. The people, they need hope. A symbol. He gazed at the distant spire. There are more villages out there. More people suffering. He touched the halo around his head, which pulsed faintly. I think my work here is done. The land is healing. The daemon presence is broken. But you'll come back. There was hope in her voice. Darian smiled. Count on it. As he settled in for the night, wrapped in the blanket, he felt the Elder Scroll warm against his side. Opening it, he found new text had appeared. The path of light continues. Beyond the scorch line lies the Rot Father's domain. A different kind of darkness awaits. He closed the book, looking up at the stars. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new enemies. But tonight, for the first time in memory, the people of Ember Hollow slept without fear. Winter would come to the scorch line, but it would be a natural winter, not the eternal summer of burning earth. And when spring returned, it would bring life to a land long thought dead. The Saint of Light closed his eyes, halo dimmed to a gentle glow, ready for whatever came next. And the realm held its breath, sensing that something fundamental had changed. A single light and his champions had appeared in the darkness, and where light spreads, darkness recedes. Thalia, composing a new ballad, said, "Next stop, the Rot Father's domain. But first, we watch the world remember how to heal." Kale, sheathing Oath Keeper, said, "Never thought I'd see a volcano bloom." Lumina, quietly, said, "This is why we fight. Not just to destroy darkness. To replace it." As the group departed, villagers planted seeds in the newly fertile soil, tiny acts of defiance against the Veil's decay. The Saint's light had ignited more than a battlefield. It had kindled a revolution of hope. Seedling fire crossed swords, Latin cross sparkles fire volcano.